All right, so we have Grayson Daughters, Atlanta blogger and media consultant, on the line. Grayson, there's been some, I don't know if we want to call it breaking political news, but last Friday there was the revelation that came out of the John Edwards camp about some relations that he had. And really, I guess the question is this even breaking news at this point? I mean, we had even talked about this months and months ago. What's your take on sort of the developments, the way it's come out, and also the fact that this isn't really even breaking news?
No, it's absolutely not breaking news. This is old news for anyone who has been following this story. We happen to have been following it via the National Enquirer, though, and the Huffington Post. So some, I would say, off-the-beaten-path or non-traditional methods of following a story.
Are you thinking that the mainstream media then has dropped the ball in terms of reporting this information? Is this a case where maybe there were some pressures to the mainstream not to report this, and then now all of a sudden he wants to come out and make this revelation? I mean, what do you make of this now, you know, the interview, first of all, and the fact that no one else other than these couple of other media outlets had been following this?
Well, the mainstream media, such as, Brian Ross from ABC News, the media reporter from the Washington Post, CNN, every single mainstream media outlet has confessed to having investigated this story, however, for months now. However, none of them have reported this story up until now. They have remained, I think their investigations and their inquiries, Brian Ross, for instance, said, we've been following the financial trail of this story, how this person who may or may not have had John Edwards' baby may have been receiving funding. Where is that funding coming from? Who's paying for that? Who was paying hush money? They confess to having followed this financial trail. However, the simple fact of the matter is no one has reported this story other than the National Enquirer and the Huffington Post up until this Friday, when John Edwards chose to go public with it.
So that begs the question. I mean, the media is notorious from quoting bloggers these days. I mean, they quote other newspapers when other newspapers break news and give other people attribution. So what do you make of all this?
You know what? I think it really comes down to the politics of sex in the media. And this, I think that mainstream media is still run primarily by white men. Here was sort of one of their own in these sexual escapades, these sexual, political. I think it makes them squirm so bad. It hits so close to home for people in power, in power in media. For instance, white men who are reporting on this, whether it's your Brian Ross at ABC News or whatever. I think these kind of situations make them so deeply, deeply uncomfortable, and there's a natural instinct to, A, not talk about it because it's not polite, and B, although I'm sure they all gossip about it 24/7 outside of the newsroom or at the local pub or wherever. I'm sure they gossip in the newsroom about all these sort of things. However, to go out and broadcast for a white male to sit up there and say another white male is having sex outside of marriage and knocking up other women and ignoring his wife who is cancer-stricken, I think it really makes them so deeply uncomfortable. They're simply uncomfortable reporting it.
Well, we've certainly had other sex scandals within the last year, notably the governor of New York, who had his little dealings. So I mean, the media knows, they know that sex sells, but maybe, do you think maybe it was the presidential politics? I don't know that we know all the inside media politicking that goes on in terms of reporting stories, but I do know that this was a presidential year, and with John Edwards being a candidate, perhaps, I mean, there are some other pressures as well. I mean, is that something you've considered?
It's really just hard to say in this case as to why they remained so quiet on, because, John Edwards was still in the race when all this broke. He was still a candidate for president. He was up until, I think, Iowa back in the winter, in January, February, whenever Iowa was. He was certainly a candidate, a very viable candidate for president, and certainly everyone knew about this situation at the time. I don't think people are paying attention to these sort of alternative sources. Mm-hmm. As Jeff Jarvis says, the web, when things are on the web or they're in sort of non-traditional, they're not coming from the voice of God as an anchor person through the TV. They're coming from many other sources, whether it's the National Enquirer, whether it's, say, a blog. Jeff Jarvis says the web is not only a place where you get it from, it's a listening post. It's where you listen for new information and you find it. To tell you the truth, maybe these people, these traditional reporters and journalists aren't really using the internet the way we are. Maybe they aren't out there gathering information off the internet, for instance, and off these alternative sources the way, say, you and I are. They're not looking at these and treating them as real news sources. Maybe they have a bit of maturity, a ways to go in terms of treating the internet as a viable and very critical information source. For instance, how many things do we find out on Twitter? We use it every day. We find out all kinds of things on Twitter way before the general public or mass media finds out, because we're using Twitter, and we have for a while now, and we consider that a very viable, reliable source of information. But to tell you the truth, I really don't know if some of these mainstream media organizations are so, hobbled by the old way of doing things. They're so constricted by their old ways of finding information and their old sources that maybe they're just not aware of some of what's going on out there.
It was very interesting considering the fact that the internet has tremendously sped up the news cycle, and like sites like Twitter, like you just mentioned, they have amplified the word of mouth nature of just communications and sped that up as well.
Exactly.
So it would definitely behoove, I guess, everyone involved in the news business to get up with some of this digital media. But in light of our conversation, is there anything else that you'd like to add about sort of the latest revelations from the Edwards camp, any of what it means for politics or the news business in general?
Well, I don't think it's going to have too many legs in terms of the overall political environment. I think it's going to make a national disgrace or global disgrace out of John Edwards. I think the way he's handling, I think it's going to become, it's going to have some legs now in terms of we're going to find out, I think, some financial implications of this situation. There's going to be a money trail that a lot of people are following. And I think he's going to be disgraced politically for quite a long time. But I really think this is an individual case. I don't think it's going to really impact too much of the way things are being done in politics right now. I think that the money question is, will media treat sex stories or sex scandals any differently now? I don't know. We're going to just have to see.
All right. I've been spending a few minutes talking to Grayson Daughters. Tell us where they can find your blog, Grayson.
Mostlymedia.wordpress.com is my media blog.
All righty.
So,
and you are out of Atlanta, Georgia. I want to thank you, Grayson, for spending a few minutes with my Urban Report.
Thank you so much, Amani. Glad to do it.